Hello and welcome to today's webinar on calendar systems that you may encounter in your family history research. My name is Ginevra Morse. I'm the Vice President of Education and Programming here at American Ancestors and New England Historic Genealogical Society. I will be your moderator for today's session. This program is brought to you by the Brew Family Learning Center. American Ancestors and New England Historic Genealogical Society is a nonprofit organization supported by our members and donors. We provide resources and expertise in nearly all aspects of family history, and we're pleased to offer such programming for our members and friends around the world. Our presenter today is senior genealogist Rhonda McClure. Rhonda is a nationally recognized professional genealogist and lecturer. Before joining American Ancestors in 2006, she ran her own genealogical business for 18 years. She was a contributing editor for Heritage Quest magazine, Biography magazine, and was a contributor to the History Channel magazine, as well as American History magazine. In addition to numerous articles, she's the author of several books, including the award-winning The Complete Idiot's Guide to Online Genealogy, Finding Your Famous and Infamous Ancestors, and Digitizing Your Family History. She's also the editor of the newest edition of the Genealogist Handbook for New England Research, which was released a little while ago. Her areas of expertise include immigration and naturalization, late 19th and early 20th century urban research, New England, Midwest, Southern, German, Italian, Scottish, Irish, French, Canadian, and New Brunswick research. Now, while dates are foundational to your family history research, they're not always straightforward in the record or may follow a modern calendar system. Rhonda will cover some common calendar systems that you may encounter in your research. She'll discuss how to interpret and record them and suggest several online conversion tools and other resources to put these dates into familiar terms. At any point during the presentation, feel free to type your question into the Q&A panel at the bottom of your screen. We'll address those at the end. There is a syllabus for this session that could be purchased from our online bookstore. You'll find a link to this downloadable PDF in your reminder emails, as well as in your follow-up email after today's broadcast. I'll also post it in the chat in just a moment. We are recording this event, and starting later today, you can freely go back and review any of the content from the presentation on our website, as well as our YouTube channel. So if you missed something on today's first listen, don't worry, you can always go back and review the presentation later. So without further ado, I'll turn things over to Rhonda.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining. Calendars are something that I will admit, I guess because I've done genealogy for so long, I sort of roll with what I get. However, when trying to put everything together so that I could share it with you, there's a lot to it. So we're going to jump right in here. So, importance of calendars. Well, the biggest thing is that all of the events that we are tracing for our ancestors obviously came with a date of some sort. However, the calendar that was used by your ancestors may be unique to your ancestors' ethnicity. You may also find that their religious denomination affected the calendar and or how records were recorded, thus requiring you to know a little bit more about the various calendars. Also, while some of you may be aware, not everybody is, but they did not necessarily all begin on January 1st. Before we jump into calendars and years, we're going to take a moment and talk about the week. One of the things that we are used to, of course, is the 7-day week, Sunday to Saturday or Monday to Sunday, depending on what you consider to be the first day of the week. This is actually, the 7-day week has actually been observed for more than 3,000 years. That even surprised me when I was digging into all of this information. Early, before we had names for the days of the week, they were usually just identified by the letters A to G, A being the first day, G being the last day of the week. Ultimately, we're going to see that they become named after the sun, the moon, and 5 gods. We'll talk about that in a second. And many of the languages that we find ourselves researching in French, Spanish, German, whatever, they also draw from those basic sun, moon, and the gods. So the origins of our 7 days, the sun and the moon, both in the Roman gods as well as the Nordic gods, because they played a very big role, especially, if you've watched any of the Viking type shows that are on, they directly affected our England as well. So you see here both the Roman versions of the sun, the moon, and the 5 gods, Mars, Mercury, Jupiter, Venus, and Saturn. And then on the Nordic side, you have the sun, the moon, Tyr, Odin, Thor, and Frigg. And for some reason, they did not have a god that they associated with Saturn. Instead, they used Laugr, which means washing. And so to them, that last day of the week was the day that you did your washing. The days of the week that show the Latin versions, the Saxon version, and our present English, you can see how the Latin is more the Roman. You can literally recognize most of your gods. And then the Saxons, prior to really taking over, and really embracing their Christian side, you see the names of some of the gods. Woden for Wednesday is Odin. We have Thor, we have Frigga, and Saturn. And now, of course, you can see that those all kind of morph into our traditional Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and Saturday. So our weeks make up our calendars, and probably the earliest calendar that most of us find ourselves having to work with would be the Julian calendar. It was actually named for Julius Caesar. He was given the honor because he adopted this calendar in 46 BC, a couple of years before he died. Was murdered. Let's get it, let's be technical. This calendar actually lasted for 1,600 years. Doesn't mean it was perfect, but it did survive for 1,600 years. Here we have a sort of a chart that shows some of the earlier calendars that were created by Romulus, and one that was created in the 7th century by Numa. All these dates are in BC. And on the far left, we have the months as they were known with the Roman wording. And then I have bolded Caesar's column, and then Augustus in 8 BC did some minor adjustments. There is also some dispute amongst the scholars of calendars as to whether or not the dates that are attributed to Caesar were actually his, or if they were actually what Augustus finally came up with or started with and then altered, as you can see in February. One of the biggest changes that Augustus is known for was when the leap year happened. So Caesar adopts this calendar, gets everybody going on it, and then sadly, he gets murdered. And so he's not there to oversee his calendar as it is going forward. The pontifices are in charge of maintaining his calendar. However, they have misunderstood something in his directions. He said that there should be a leap year every 4th year. And in Roman thinking and wording, there was something that was known as inclusive counting. In other words, this year that we are in right now would be the 1st year. And so technically the 4th year would only be 3 years out. And so that is what the pontifices did when they were adding the leap years in. So instead of it being every 4 years, it was actually happening every 3 years. As a result, not surprisingly, things got a little messy. And so Augustus adjusts that. He sees that, yes, that's a problem. We've got to fix that. And he does that. Additionally, one of the things that I don't think a lot of people know is that for the Romans, their calendar actually began on the 1st of January. Now you'll see in our chart here that it actually starts with an I. Keep in mind that I's and J's were kind of used interchangeably there. The Romans used the I. We have changed that to a J. But it would actually be the Christian church who's going to later distance themselves from the quote pagan practices and look for another day to start their year. I'm sure most of us were actually taught this lovely little poem when we were probably in elementary school. I will be honest, I can only usually remember it to November, which is really the only parts I need because then I know February. But 30 days have September, April, June, and November. All the rest have 31, except for February. It's the one which only has 28 days clear and 29 in each leap year. This is a great way to know how many days your months are going to have. Interestingly enough, there is no, they have not been able to identify who wrote this. It's just identified as anonymous, but it was written in 1555. So what was the first day of the year? Well, as I mentioned, the Romans, tracing back to 158 BC, chose the 1st of January. The Christian church that was really coming into being, especially as the, as the Christian faith was spreading, they wanted to distance themselves from anything that harked to the quote pagan practices. So anything having to do with the various gods, etc. And so for them, they decided that the Feast of the Annunciation, which is March 25th, and was basically the angel announcing that Jesus was coming, as their first day of the year. The problem, though, is that some other Christians preferred Christmas Day to be the first day of the year, and still others opted for Easter Day. This was a problem, though, because that day, as we all know, is not constant. It's not the same day every year. Constantine, when he moved to Byzantium, he actually started his year in the 1st of September. So is it any wonder we have no idea when the 1st of the year is, especially when it comes to our ancestors? So most of the time, though, because a lot of us are researching our ancestors came to America in the colonial time frame, we often are presented with the month, the 1st of the year being the 25th of March. So you've got April, May, June, July, and August. And then if you'll notice, September, October, November, and December, these hearken from the earlier Roman time frame and actually correspond to being the 7th, 8th, 9th, and 10th months of the year. And in some records, you may actually see them abbreviated as I have in the parentheses here. So for September, you may see the 7 MBER, the same for October and November. December, in addition to a 10 BER, you will also sometimes see the Roman numeral X, which stands for 10. And then, of course, January, February, and March 1st to the 24th were at the tail end of the Julian calendar for most of us when we're researching. The Gregorian calendar is going to come about, and the history of it is actually kind of fascinating. Now, When Julian's calendar was adopted in 45 BC, he actually knew that there were some issues with his calendar. They had overestimated the number of days in the year. So they kind of rounded up to 365 and a quarter years. It's not quite that. And so as a result, as you go forward into the many, many centuries, the vernal equinox starts to take place earlier each year as far as the calendar is concerned. The other thing was that Easter was falling later. Interestingly enough, it is not the vernal equinox starting earlier and coming earlier and earlier that upsets the people. It turns out to be Easter, and most especially when Easter begins to fall on what they determined were inappropriate days, that they look at the idea that they're going to have to adjust this calendar. The reform of the Julian calendar was begun under Pope Clement VI in 1344. Unfortunately, he had a nasty little pandemic of his own, the Black Death that he had to deal with, and that delayed things, and then he himself died. Step up of roughly 200 years later, and Pope Gregory XIII decides that it is really time they've got to adjust this calendar. It is especially necessary for the fulfillment of the 1563 decree by the Council of Trent. He feels that cannot happen without an adjustment to the calendar. It literally took 2 centuries for this, and he has to go back and forth. He talks to a lot of different, astronomers. He brings a very famous astronomer in to deal with this. There's a lot of mathematics. There's a lot of people who weigh in on this, and ultimately, he adopts it in. He releases it. He signs his papal bull in 1582, but not every country is going to adopt it at the same time. And as a result of when they adopt it and where they are, in other words, how far out they are from the 1582 time period, that also results in which and how many omitted days there are for the various countries. Here we have just a few of the countries, the earliest countries to adopt. Not surprisingly, you'll see Rome, Italy, Portugal, Spain, Poland, Luxembourg, France, Belgium, Austria, up to Belgium. Predominantly your Catholic areas, all adopting it as soon as the papal bull is signed, and boom, in 1582, we're all good to go. You'll notice that Rome and Italy, and I say them separately because Rome itself was a separate entity in this time frame from the various other Italian provinces, but they were all Catholic. So they, Portugal, Spain, and Poland are all going to adopt at the same time. And the days that are going to be omitted from the calendar are the 5th to the 14th of October of that year. For Luxembourg, they're a little bit later, and they are going to omit the 15th to the 24th of December. And France is going to omit the 10th to the 19th. Now, Belgium and Austria adopted in 1582 and in 1583. However, the actual date of adoption for the various areas of what we consider today present-day Belgium and Austria are going to vary slightly by region. So it's sort of like an average of, yes, they adopted it in 1582, 1583. Holland's Catholic, they say it is 1582, but they're not exactly sure. The same thing for the Protestants, who don't do it until the 1700s as well. Then you have Germany and its Catholic groups, again, varied by region, because Germany as a country was not one entity. There were several duchies and kingdoms. They varied by region, but it was roughly around 1583. Czechoslovakia and Switzerland's Catholics are going to do it in 1584, losing days in January and Hungary in 1587. Then we're going to see a big gap before some of the other countries start to do it. Germany's Protestants will do it in 1700, losing days 19 to 28. Denmark and Norway adopt in 1700 as well, losing the same days, 19 to 28 February. Switzerland in 1701, losing days 1 to 11 of January. And the United Kingdom, which included England, Ireland, Scotland, and the colonies, do not adopt until 1752, and the days that get omitted are the 3rd to the 13th. The reason they don't adopt until 1752 is they are really against adopting anything that came out of the Catholic Church. The result of the change from the Julian to the Gregorian calendar does cause quite a few dating issues. And in some records, you will see records using 2 years, double dating, which we will address a little later on in today's talk. The other thing you may find is the year followed by either an abbreviation OS for Old Style, which translates to the Julian calendar, or NS for New Style, which meant the Gregorian calendar. The following countries, Japan, Egypt, China, and Persia, never actually used the Julian calendar, but they will eventually adopt the Gregorian calendar in the years you see in abbreviations, in large part because now they are starting to interact with the other countries, and all those other countries are using the Gregorian calendar. However, if you are researching in the Greek Orthodox Church records, they are still using the Julian calendar. So by the American Revolution, most of the places that we as ancestors, are researching a lot of our ancestors, we have come to, the Gregorian calendar. However, there's this little dust up in France, the French Republican, the French Revolution, and it results in them kind of stepping away to the French Republican calendar. It replaced the Gregorian calendar at the start of the French Republic. So basically, it was officially used from the 24th of October, 1793 to the 31st of December, 1805, but they backdated and made the first day of the year, 22 September, 1792, the day of the founding of the French Republic. If you are working in any records in France and its modern day areas of Belgium, Germany, parts of Italy, Luxembourg, parts of the Netherlands and Switzerland that were under French rule from the 1793 to 1805, it is very possible that you are going to find yourself having to understand the French Republican calendar. This means civil registration records, so your births, your marriages, your deaths, legal documents, the notarial records. This is how they handle things like land deeds and probates and whatnot, as well as other government records in this 12-year period. The French Republican calendar is not easy, in large part because they completely name all of the months something different. And they do it based on these kind of natural events. So you'll see things like the grape harvest month, fog month, frost month. And at the bottom of this chart, you'll see that I've had to color code because they had the autumn months, then they had the winter months, the spring months, and the summer months. And because you are likely to see these names in all of these different languages, I have included in the chart what they were in the various languages. In addition to having renamed all of the months, which makes it very difficult to figure out where you are in a year if you're not familiar with the order of the months. They went even further because now they had these 12 months and every month had 3 10-day weeks. So they had 30 days for all of theirs. That'll total up to 360 days. We got to make up some days somewhere. As a result, we have what were known as complementary or feast days that they tacked on to the end of the year. And you'll see 6 here. So we have the first day of virtue, second day genius, third day's labor, fourth day's opinion, fifth day rewards. And then there is a 6th day revolution that was used in the leap years. So you've got your 12 months, and then you have these 5 random days tacked on to the end. However, when you consider the fact that now we have these 10-day weeks, that means the people who live there and are working now are having to work 10-day weeks. They're not too thrilled with this. Also, they're having to work on Sundays, which they're definitely not thrilled with. Now, to add to all of our fun with all of these names of changes in the months and these added feast days, they also had a name for every day of the week or every day of each month that was completely different and kind of, so it can be really, really frustrating when you're working in these records. Here we have an example of a 1799 marriage record, and it says Aujourd'hui 30 Misidor, 7e année République. And so we are going to take that, and I'm going to show you all the different ways in which they could have used that date. So there is le 30e jour, so the 30th day of the month of Messidor, in the 7th day, the 7th year of the French Republic. So every year is not given like 1805 or 1799. It is what year since the French Republic has been in existence do we see. We also see the one that was more traditional to what we had in the actual record, the second, 30 Messidor, 7e année République. Sometimes, though, you will see it literally just abbreviated with the number in traditional numerals, the name of the month, and then the Roman numeral of the year of the Republic. And then the final bottom one that you see here, Chalemier, is the actual day name for the 30th of Messidor in 7e année. So all of these are possible variations you might come across in French records of the French Republic era. It was discontinued ultimately in 1805 because it was very, very difficult to work with the other countries who all were working with the Gregorian calendar. The Jewish calendar is another calendar, especially if you have a lot of, Eastern European immigrants that you have come across. And it actually is much further up than ours as far as the year. It begins at what they say is the moment of creation, which they have through calculations determined was 5 October 3761 BC at 6 p.m. Now, the Jewish calendar uses the Metonic cycle. This is a lunar calendar that was invented by the Greek astronomer Meton. The cycle was a period of 19 years. Within those 19 years, they had what they called embolismic years. These were years that had 13 months instead of the traditional 12. It occurred in the 3rd, the 6th, the 8th, the 11th, the 14th, 17th, and 19 years. And if you coordinated all of these in the 19-year cycle, it resulted in 365.24682 days per year. Here you can see the names of the month of the Jewish calendar, and there is the, so you've got the month Tishri, and I may be saying that incorrectly. I do apologize for that. That is the first month of their year, and there are 30 days. You will find that a couple of them have alter between 29 or 30 days, depending on certain items, postponements, etc. And then you have the those 2 months, that extra month that are intercalated. So the additional month that is needed every so often during the cycle. Now, this table here was taken from E.G. Richards' Mapping Time, the Calendar and Its History. I'll talk about that in a little bit, but again, you can see here the distribution of the days through a common year. That would be the years that do not have the 13 months, and then the embolismic years where you do have your extra month. And then there is a key to the letters used in the character of the year. So there was a deficient, a regular, and an abundant. And based on the distribution of the days, you'll see that some have quite a few more days of the year than the common year, because we have added that whole extra 30-day month. The Shabbat.org website has a calendar view that you can look at that actually shows you what the Gregorian equivalent is for today, and then also identifies what months it is for the Jewish calendar, which tend to overlap. In other words, the start of a new month for the Jewish calendar is usually somewhere in the middle of the current Gregorian month. And so you can see that on here. This is a great website for trying to figure out what day it is currently. So the Jewish calendar is referred to as lunar solar, which basically means that in addition to the minute cycles that keep it in sync with the moon, it also is in sync with the sun. Each hour is subdivided into 1,080 shalak, and that equates to about 18 of these, quote, shalakim per traditional minute. So if you were to try and figure out an exact time, you could break it down with the Jewish calendar. The first day of their calendar is Tishri 1, which is Rosh Hashanah. It also occurs near the fall equinox. So once again, we have a calendar that is not starting on January 1st. It is starting in the fall. And there are certain rules about their holy days and the Sabbath that have to be respected. Certain things cannot happen. Certain holy days cannot be on certain days of the week. The Sabbath must always be on Saturday. As a result, sometimes their calendar does have to make some adjustments that they refer to as postponements that they use to accommodate this. When you are researching, especially in any country where your ancestry is Jewish, but they are having to interact with the government of whatever country, you may find that the records carry two dates in them. And so here we have a Russian document, and I've highlighted a red box, and you'll notice that there are a bunch of numbers, 2 on the left and 2 on the right. I'm going to show you the translation of this record. And what you'll see here is that the dates on the left are for December 15th and 22nd. These are the Christian dates of the birth and the circumcision, because this is a little boy. And then on the right, the dates are the 27th of December and the 4th of, well, what would have been the new month for them. And this is a perfect example of how you can see that there are two different months within a more traditional Gregorian calendar. So you may find that your records carry both Christian, AKA civil, and Jewish dating, which kind of nicely segues us into dating in documents. For the purposes of today, we are going to touch just briefly on double dates, Quaker dates, regnal dates, and feast days. Double dates. This is something that is often confusing to people. And I have talked to a few people over the years, and some of them have commented, oh, I guess they didn't know the exact year because I found in these records that there's 2 years mentioned. So I've highlighted in the abstracted, what we call TAN series, volumes of Massachusetts vital records up to 1850 that were done for about 220 of the towns in Massachusetts for preservation purposes. And so here we have in the Bernard family, I've highlighted Mary, who was a twin to John, who was a twin child of John Jr. and Alice, who was born January 21st, 1747/8. Keep in mind that up until 1752, the American colonies were under the Julian calendar. So January to March 23rd were straddling 2 years. As a result, this is how they accommodated that. They would put the month, the year, the month, the day, and then they would put the year in both, quote, old style, 47, and new style, 48. And so you'll see that we've got a few of those that I have highlighted here that show those double dates. But then I underlined a couple of other dates on this page. So Robert, son of Stephen and Rebecca, was born in March of 1689, but he doesn't have a double date. And that's because he was born March 28th. He is born 4 days into, quote, the new year of 1689. And then Sarah at the very bottom, who's the daughter of John and Sarah, was born March 20th, 1758. And the reason she's not double dated is because we are now past the adoption of 1752 of the Gregorian calendar by England and therefore all of its colonies and whatnot. Quakers. And we're going to go more into detail on this in, let's see, this is June. In July, we're doing a 3-week course all about Quaker records. If you are interested, you'll find it on our website. However, Quakers do not use the names of the days of the week, nor do they use the names of the days of the month. We talked about where the names of our weekdays come from. They come from the names of gods. The Quakers don't like this. This is the same thing that happens with some of the months as well. March is being taken from the god Mars. July is named for Julius Caesar. August for Augustus Caesar. So the Quakers do not use the names of those for religious reasons. As a result, what you end up with is, as you can see here, this is a members list. And so we have some individuals who have birth dates, and the first one we'll just go with Eliashib Smith, the child of Eliashib and Margaret, and he was born the 8th month, 7th day, 1804. Sometimes you will see the month and day swapped so that the day number comes first, then the 8MO, and then the year. Because this is 1804, so we're after the change to the Gregorian calendar, this I know is the 7th of August, 1804. You'll also see that on the far left of this particular document, and this is actually a 2-page spread, in addition to births, it does what was called a removal, which meant they went from one meeting to another. If they returned, there's another column. If they were disowned, deaths, that's all on the right-hand page of this 2-page spread. However, you'll also see on the left when they came into the meeting and how they were brought in by certificate. Sometimes you'll see something by convincing. And so that also will have, at the very least, the month and year that they were brought in, because there's another volume where you could look up the exact date that their certificate was written, and so forth. As I mentioned, because they're dealing with only numbers, it's really, really important that you pay attention to the year in these records to make sure whether or not you're dealing with the Julian or the Gregorian calendar. Regnal dates are something that you may have come across or you may not. It depends largely on if you are dealing with very early English records, and or I have found them a lot up in Canadian records when Canada was, especially in the 1700s and early 1800s. And so here I have highlighted a land record, and at the very end of the land record, it is identified as the 24th day of May in the 54th year of the reign of his said majesty, and in the year of our Lord 1814. You don't always get in the year of our Lord 1814. Very often, all you get is the 54th year of the reign of His Majesty. Usually, they will tell you which majesty we're talking about at that time. If you don't get the actual calendar year in numbers, you have to convert the regnal date. To do that, one of the resources that I use is this website, and it is in the handout. I had to shorten it for the slide because it does go a little long. If you use that URL, you will have to look for it a little bit, or you can reach out to me and I can send you the full link if you need. However, if we take the 24th day of May, those obviously aren't going to change in this instance. And interestingly enough, they are less likely to change in the, as far as the year of reign, but the calculator is going to know exactly when the monarch started their reign, when they finished their reign, and they've also built into this converter, a change from the Julian to the Gregorian as well. So in this case, because this happened to be in 1814 timeframe, and I would have kind of known that just by the dates of the records that I was looking at, I knew that it happened to be King George III. So you choose the monarch in question, who, like I said, is normally named in the record. You choose the day and month, and then the number you type in the number of the year of reign and click on the find. And what they will give you is, first off, they tell you that when the monarch reigned. So that will be filled in after you click find, and then they will tell you the calendar year is 1814 AD. And then I really love the fact that they include notes. So in this case, technically, because George had, he was really losing his mind by this point, his son, Prince George, was ruling as regent between 25 October 1810 and 29 January of 1820. So they also address if there are 2 calendar years supplied, again, incorporating the Julian old style, new style type of dating. One item, if you're dealing with church records, that you may find very prevalent, especially in like the German records, I've seen it a lot more frequently, but this happens to be for the Lutheran Church, is the seasons of the church year and the feast days. Sometimes, so most church calendars begin with Advent and work their way around. And oftentimes, when they are recording the records in the church book, they may say that it is the first week of Lent or whatever, the, Monday, Thursday, etc. And so if you do not understand the feast days and how that is arranged in a particular religion, you will want to research that, because sometimes they won't give you an actual, 29th of December. Instead, they're going to give you some relationship to one of the feast days or major holy days. All right, let's talk about calculating dates for a second. One of the things that I find I get really excited is if a death record and or a tombstone gives me the full date of death and gives me the age in year, month, and day. I can use kind of this little grid here to separate the age from the date of death and get what I call a calculated birth. So in this example here, the individual died on the 21st of September in 1897. So you go year, number of the month, and then the days of the week, or the days of the month. Keeping in mind that if you're back in the Julian calendar, we've got to play around with things with the calculated birth and or, understanding where we may be falling. However, what you're going to do then is you're going to subtract the age of the person at death. In this case, he was 25 years, 6 months, and 6 days. That was easy math. 21 minus 6 gives us the 15th, 9 minus 6 gives us 3, the month of March, and 1897 minus 25 gives us the year of 1872. Keep in mind that you may have to borrow from a year or a month to actually to do the math. You want to keep in mind how many days there are in the month that you're borrowing. So in this case, I have adjusted our age of our person, and you'll see now that the person is 24 days old, but they died on the 21st day of September. So now I have to borrow a month. I have to borrow 30 days from the month of September. When I do that, obviously I'm going to slash out the 9. I'm going to change that to 8 for August. I'm going to add the 30 days to the 21 days I had in September. This is going to give me 51 days needed so that I can subtract the 24 days of the age of the person. And then 8 minus 6 gives me the month of February. And then again, 1897 minus 25 gives us 1872. So this is a really good way to work with, calculating a birth that you are finding from information from a death. Resources. There are a lot of resources and good ways of finding information on calendars. The FamilySearch.org wikis are excellent. Forgotten books. I'm going to talk about a few of these, including Family Searches wikis and forgotten books. Google, I keep telling people Google is my friend. There isn't anything I haven't asked Google that it hasn't given me something. Internet Archive at archive.org, of course, is another digitized book resource. JSTOR.org has tons of scholarly articles and books that might help, and good old Wikipedia. When we get to FamilySearch.org, under the search option at the main Family Search page, all the way at the bottom, you will see Wiki. If you click on that, that's going to take you to this page that you see here, or you can just go to the URL that I have at the bottom of this slide. And in this case, I started to type in French Republican calendar. You'll see that it kind of starts to populate as I type. And then it immediately took me to this wonderful article about the French Republican calendar. And you'll see that there's the history of the calendar, principles of the new calendar, localities it was used, all sorts of information. As I mentioned, forgottenbooks.com. I love this site. Now, there's a subscription, and then there is you can just pay by the book that you want. I have a subscription to it because I just absolutely love it. I turn to it all the time. Very often, books that I have seen that like Amazon has reprinted as classic reprints, I can get an electronic copy of it right on Forgotten Books. And you will see that there's a dissertation of the calendar and zodiac of ancient Egypt. Our calendar, the calendar. So the Indian calendars, they have a lot more than just the Julian and the Gregorian. However, I chose Our Calendar by George Nichols Packer. And when you click on it, it will take you to this page. And as I said, because I subscribe, I can add it to my books, or I can download it or read it now. And then they do have links to paperback/hardcover versions of them as well. And I just grabbed the couple of pages of the contents of this. Again, you'll see there's a lot of information about the definitions, the history of the divisions. He's got the whole mathematical thing, the errors of the Julian calendar, errors of the Gregorian calendar. There is a lot of math involved in calendars. And then the third part talks about the solar cycle, the lunar cycle, all sorts of things that fall into figuring out the calendars. And then there's an entire chapter as well on the Hebrew calendar. I mentioned earlier, I took one of the charts out of Mapping Time, the Calendar and Its History by E.G. Richards. Interestingly enough, this individual got interested in time and calendars as a result of his writing computer programs to convert dates from one calendar to another. The deeper he dug in trying to figure out what he needed to do for the program to convert the dates, the more obsessed he became about the calendars. It is full of tables and algorithms and illustrations. He has so much math in here that if you wanted to, you could become a scholar on how to convert calendars. There are also some great calendar websites for doing quick conversions and or figuring out exactly when a particular day is. So we're going to kind of look at most of these websites individually. We already sort of talked about the regnal year. If you go to this menu -days and dates link, then you can get yourself directly to the regnal years screen that you see here. One of my go-tos is timeanddate.com. I can put in any day, any year, and any country that I need to try and figure out when a day is. If I'm looking at, say, something that was published in a newspaper and what they say is, oh, 2 days ago, and the newspaper was published, on a particular day, but I don't know what day that it was. So I use this all the time for figuring out when a particular day is in a particular year in a country. There's a great converter on the Napoleon.org website for the Republican calendar, where you can put in this case, we have the 1st of Vendémiaire, in the first year of the Republic, and that tells us that was 22 September 1792, not surprisingly, because that was the founding of the French Revolution, or the Republic rather. And then this one is a nifty little one for figuring out the day of, again, the actual day of a particular of the week. And you can see that there is both old style and new style, depending largely on what day you're talking about and what year you're working with. Are you in the old style or the new style? In review, calendars are not all the same. As we have seen, you need to really pay attention to the year of an event, especially when it's written in all numbers, and where it is because of this whole Julian Gregorian thing. You want to work with the various online date converters if you are really struggling to figure out when a particular event took place. And remember, double dates don't mean that the year was not known. What it is doing is identifying the old and the new style, so the Julian and the Gregorian year within that particular date.
All right, well, thank you, Rhonda, for your presentation. Before we get to your questions, which we have time to get to, I just wanted to tell you about a few upcoming events. So starting on tomorrow, June 14th, we have a 3-week online course on researching impoverished ancestors across North America. And in this 3-session online course, we'll discuss how communities cared for the poor from colonial times through the early 20th century. We'll demonstrate how to navigate records and collections and provide some practical research strategies for finding your impoverished ancestors. We also have a great program coming up on June 20th, the day after Juneteenth. It's a part of our American Inspiration Author Series. Jonathan Eig will be in conversation about his new biography of Martin Luther King Jr. called King: A Life, moderated by Peniel Joseph. And then, as Rhonda mentioned, starting next month, about a month from today, July 12th, we have a 3-week online course on researching Quaker records. So especially if you're still kind of grappling with Quaker dates, or you're not sure where to locate Quaker records, or perhaps you don't quite understand the terminology therein, join Rhonda for that 3-part course next month. And you'll find these and all of our events on our website at americanancestors.org/events. All right, so let's get to some questions. A few people asked, you mentioned early on in your presentation during kind of the calendar, or some of the reasons for the calendar shift, was Easter was falling on inappropriate days. Can you explain what that means?
I actually can't. I dug around trying to find out what it meant. And unfortunately, all I could hear was inappropriate. My guess is that it was happening not on a Sunday. That's the only thing I could think of. Just as like the Sabbath for the Jewish calendar needs to be on a Saturday. And so that was the only thing I could think of. But I will try, like I've tried digging into that in more detail, and I haven't found an answer that makes sense.
Or if the days are shifting, could it just be, I don't know, getting too late in the year or something? Who knows?
It's very possible that that was it as well, because as I said, it was getting later and later. And so, maybe it was past a certain point and that was bad. And so, like I said, it's hysterical that it had nothing to do with the vernal equinox, but Easter, that prompted them to say, we've got to do something about this.
Now, Carrie Lynn asks about, and you showed an example of from the Massachusetts Vital Records and the successful or the correct double dating on that page that you showed, but there are examples where it's not accurate or you don't see a double date. Do you know, was that a preference of the transcribers? Were they given certain instructions? And if you see that, should alarm bells be ringing, and what should you do?
So generally speaking, the transcribers, to the best of my knowledge, were told to take things exactly as they were in the records. So the onus would have been on whoever the clerk was that was writing the original records, and maybe they did not do it. If that's the case, what I do is I will go to the originals and I will see how they are arranged to see if I can figure out whether they were old style or new style. Generally speaking, I find that it tends to be old style, but I don't make that assumption. I always try and find the original page from whatever register it was coming out of and determine it that way.
And so to be clear with the double dating, should you also be recording? Many of us use, say, online or desktop family tree programs. Can you put in double dates? Does that kind of screw with anything? How do you actually record the double dating for your own records?
So most of the programs will let you do whatever you want to. They may pop up and say, okay, which of these 2 years do I pick for sorting purposes? Internal stuff. And then I always just pick the earlier year, because technically that's the year it is. And so a couple of software programs like Family Tree Maker in the settings allow you to say, yes, there is double dating, and I am predominantly using, English records, so my double dating ends in 1752.
Kathleen asks if French colonies like parts of Canada, did they adopt the French Republic calendar during those years?
So not that I have seen, because of course, by that point, Canada, even Quebec, which is heavily French and is still maintaining all of the things that the French brought to it, so notarial records and whatnot, they are now under England. Because it's past 1763. So they now, while they are adhering to the French language and the notarial records, they do not incorporate the French Republican calendar. It's France and the areas in Europe that I mentioned that were being ruled by France at that time. So by that point, Canada was separate. It was under England. So no.
I think in the description of this program, we said something about 4 Mary, the number 4 and the name Mary. Is that a regnal year, or what kind of dating system is that?
Yes, that is a regnal year. And that would be like the shortest you would see. So basically it would be, you would translate that to the 4th year of the reign of Mary. Hopefully they gave you a number in there. But and then you should have a day and a month that goes with that.
Let's see. So Anne asks, is March considered to be the first month of the year under the Julian calendar, even though the new year didn't start until the 25th?
So technically, no, because the March year, like March 25th is the first day of the year, but March 1st to the 23rd is considered the end of the year, if that makes any sense. So it's not like the first day of the month is all of a sudden, yes, we started a new year. That's why you see in the double dating, it will go all the way up to and include the 23rd of March or the 24th of March, because the 25th of March was the first day of the new year under the Julian calendar.
Going back to kind of best practices when you're recording data in your tree, or maybe you're writing a report or anything like that. Sylvia asks, so when documenting records, is it better to use the date as it appears in the record or record the converted date?
Okay, so a lot of the genealogy software is all about, I need the day, I need the month, and I need the year. However, if that is the case, somewhere in my notes that's attached to the event, I am going to record the date as it was in my record. So if that's a regnal date, I'm going to put it exactly as I saw it, like in that, as you saw in that land record. For the Quaker dates, I am going to put that it was, the 2nd of the 10th month of, whatever the year was, somewhere, so that I have reference in case I find any kind of discrepancy later on.
All right. Let's see. Lots of great questions. Some people saying that inappropriate. I think you were on to saying, that Easter, if it falls on a day other than a Sunday, that's inappropriate. Someone asks about what calendar Russia uses.
So the Soviet Union incorporated the Gregorian calendar in 1918. When we purchased Alaska in 1867 from Russia, that was when Alaska came on board with the Gregorian. I do not know what they are using today. From what I was able to find, and again, some countries you've really got to dig in to see. They are probably using Gregorian in large part because everybody is interacting with all the other countries that do. If you want to ask me via email, I will get something where I can cite that for you.
Just a few other questions before wrapping up. Mary asks, do you have any idea how long the double dates were used by the original record keepers?
Double dates are used for the years that overlap. And so 1582 is when the Gregorian calendar comes into effect. So from that point forward, you're generally going to find either the old style, new style abbreviations, OSNS, to identify the year that they are recognizing in that document, or you're going to find the double date from January 1st to the 24th of March used.
And Nancy asks, so it sounds like Nancy's, perhaps writing a book. Nancy asks, so as not to confuse a reader, would it be appropriate in writing a book to not double date, but just use the Gregorian date?
No, that would be confusing because it is hard to determine. You could actually make somebody like technically older than they are. And one of the biggest issues is that you may have somebody putting that into a computer program. And if it's Family Tree Maker or one of these that recognizes the double date, it may make it that as the first date and tack on like the next year as the Gregorian year. So in essence, you're making them a year older or whatever. So you really should stick to the double dating.
Well, thank you again, Rhonda, for your presentation. I've personally learned so much about calendars and days of the week and things that I've taken for granted. So thank you for sharing your knowledge and giving us all more to think about as we research our family history. I want to thank everyone else for joining us today. And as you leave the event, you'll have the opportunity to fill out a survey and give us your feedback. As we continue to expand our webinars and online offerings, any feedback is extremely helpful and appreciated. This free webinar was made possible by the generous support of our members and friends around the world. Please consider making a gift to American ancestors to help keep these programs free and to create more. And if you'd like to access other how-to resources or learn about upcoming online educational programs, visit us at americanancestors.org. Thank you again, and I hope to see you at our online programs in the future. Goodbye for now.